Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Honorable Leela Sharon Aheer. Hey, Leela.
Hey, Dr. Leonard, how you doing?
I am doing great. So happy to have you on because you are helping me stay current with current events and all sorts of other things. So, just so people can know you, I'm going to read your short bio.
Okay.
So, the Honorable Leela Sharon Aheer is a former Alberta cabinet minister and respected advocate for women, multiculturalism, and community leadership. She now serves in global strategy and growth roles with BioAro Inc., the BioSport ATRACON, I think I'm saying that right, and the Alberta India Chamber of Commerce, advancing health innovation and international collaboration. A proud wife, mother, and musician, Leela brings passion and vision to every role she undertakes, and she has undertaken a few because we've had a conversation. So I am so excited to share you with our audience. So just tell us about you, how this all started. I mean, did you want to be a politician when you were young? I mean, how did this all start?
It's interesting that you say that. It's actually a question that we get a lot, I think, for anybody who decides to go into public service. And thank you to everybody who has taken on these roles because needless to say, they're difficult and they're tricky, but at the same time, such a privilege. And I've actually been door knocking my whole life. I'm one of those kids that was like totally, I lived in a rural area, rural Alberta, and it was pretty small where I was coming from. And so, going out and door knocking for heart and stroke or diabetes or something like that was like a really big deal. And, if you're like selling Girl Guide cookies or anything else like that, you have to do all of that. And fortunately for me, I babysat pretty much everyone in my area, so they all knew who I was. And there was a council meeting when I was quite young, and I went to that, and they were looking for help with getting information out about who this person was. And so I ended up going out door knocking with her. She was the first woman actually elected in our area. And she was just a rock star and only passed away recently. And she was such a tough cookie. Eventually became mayor of our area as well too. But it really, I think, lit a fire in me to participate in that way and to get to know kind of what the dynamic was, in your area and how people were feeling. And rural areas are obviously different from cities and the concerns are different. And it's not like we had driveways that needed to be shoveled or sidewalks or anything like that, but we had major water issues and we had concerns about livestock and we had concerns about, how provincial governments were going to help with farmers that had had like a really bad season, which wasn't at municipal level, but they still ask, right?
Mhm.
So you learn a lot as a young kid. And then my background is I'm Southeast Asian and Caucasian. So my dad came from India in 1963, 1962, pardon me, and married my mom, who's this little Caucasian, Irish, English, Scottish, Scandinavian girl from Edmonton, Alberta, which is our province's capital. And they met when they were singing in a choir because when my dad came from India, he joined a Western choir to get to know more about the culture and to learn the music and just fell head over heels in love with Western classical music. So he met my mom in this choir, and my dad is like beautiful, dark-skinned South Indian, person, and my mom's like redhead with freckles. So you can imagine in 1969, the two of them dating. It was unusual to say the least, and then getting married in 1970. And so it was interesting when I was in high school. I think I was in grade 10 or yeah, probably grade 10 or grade 11. I was 15. And I used to participate in, all sorts of activism. It didn't, depending on where my heart was at that day. And I was at this new mall that had opened up, it's a big deal for rural kids to go into the mall in the city. So we were going into the mall to go and check out the new mall. And there was this huge protest going on in the parking lot. So I marched myself over there and wanted to find out what was all the hullabaloo. And this guy looked at me and he goes, "Well, what are you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what am I?" So anyway, he goes, "No, what's your background?" And I said, "Well, my dad is from India originally, and my mom is from Canada, and blah blah blah. And it went on, and he goes, "Well, you're an abomination." And I said, "Pardon me?" I'm like, and my 15-year-old brain is like, working overtime here. I'd never had a reaction like that to showing up at a protest or at a rally or anything like that. And I said to him, with my little 15-year-old personality, I'm like, "You prove that. What do you mean I'm an abomination?" And so, of course, I gave him my mailing address, right? Because I wanted to find out who the heck would say this kind of stuff. So then they started sending me all this information of how I had infiltrated the white Christian line and all this kind of stuff. I know it's just bonkers. I'd never trust. It's so strange. I know I grew up in like a little rural area and in Alberta, which is like conservative, front of Canada, and I come from conservative roots. I had never in my lifetime heard anything like that ever. And especially in the farming communities, we had everybody from every culture imaginable, and some people didn't even speak English, but we all worked together to bring in the crops and to help out with everybody, and I babysat everybody's kids. But it really lit a fire in me, Dr. Linert, for later on in my life. And I didn't know I was going to become a politician. I didn't realize that that was on my docket of things to do. But it just, when it presented itself, I said no 3 times. I'm a music teacher, so I had a very high functioning music studio, and I'm a professional musician myself. So it was very busy, and I was very happy and very, very, very content in my life at that time. But what they said to me really mattered at that moment. It was life changing, is that if you can change things, why wouldn't you try? Right? And to be given the opportunity. And I thought, well, sure as heck, I can't complain about anything, can I, if I'm saying no to an opportunity that's being presented? And I'm one of very few Southeast Asian women that have ever been elected in North America, let alone in Canada, from my part of Southeast Asia. And I didn't know that any of that was important, that I was a female or that I was a woman of color. I didn't think that mattered. It was a very huge tokenized part of what I became in the political world. And I don't know if I don't know if I played my role exactly right, because I was just a really like grateful human that was advocating on behalf of my constituents in a urban at that point in time. By the time I was elected, there was several small cities that had sprouted up in the areas where I grew up, and felt very, very privileged to be able to represent those folks. So I didn't really fall into the category of understanding how to use that tokenization, and I'm really glad I didn't.
Mhm.
I was the deputy leader of our party. I helped bring the conservative parties together. I sit center-ish, center right. I'm a fiscal conservative. And so didn't really fall into the hard conservative side of things, which was fine. The whole idea was to have a big tent in order to be able to support all of the people, right, across. And I had huge amount of friends across the aisle in the Democratic parties and the Liberal Party. I love them all. Like we were really, really good friends, and we would debate on the floor. But honestly, the conversations we had outside of the house were beautiful and very fundamental to my growth in that space. And that's sort of how I got there. And if it hadn't been for a group of guys that were sitting in my kitchen when I was done teaching choir one night, sitting there and telling me, "Girlfriend, you got to try this. You got to do this," I would have never even done it. Is this group of guys, like they were totally convinced that this was my next walk in life, and and then yeah, they had me in there for 8 years. So
Wow. So, as a person outside of politics, where you just were happy being the music teacher, the music business, and then going into politics, what were some of the things that you realized once you were on the inside? Any ahas, anything like, oh, I didn't know that, or you learned something that you didn't know could be?
oh, wow, that's a great question. I loved being a music teacher. Very, very satisfying work. I loved it. This opportunity that came to me in public service seemed like the right time, although I never saw it coming. I really didn't see it coming in a million years. When you're working in the community and volunteering the way I did, I felt really good about what we were giving back to the community, but I saw this as an opportunity to do even more for my community, right? Um, so many aha moments it is nothing of what you expect. Like what you think you know, you don't know anything. All of us who are elected, Dr. Leonard, are winning a popularity contest, basically. Voting and going out to the doors and doing all of that is very humbling. And if you're fortunate enough that they like you or are attracted to the ideology that you are bringing forward, or like your leader, or whatever it is, there's lots of different reasons within that pool of things that people will vote for you. Um, I presented the reason why they asked me to run is because I sat more on the progressive side of the conservatism, and they wanted to bring us into the center, and which was a very noble thought. And I thought, yeah, absolutely, because I could stand up for myself. That wasn't a problem. And I love people, and I don't judge them based on anything other than their own merit, just like I'd like to be judged on. So for me, fundamentally, conservatism comes from classical liberalism, right? Which is the fundamental right to exist, the ability to be able to uplift, to be able to make sure policy is in the best interest of the most amount of people, right? That was always like very aspirational, I realized, but fundamental rule for me. And what I and I hope this doesn't come out the wrong way. What did I learn? I learned that as an elected official, you're completely handcuffed and dependent upon the ideology, the leader, or directionally the kingmakers of that party and the people that are doing that. If you fall within the mainstream of what it is that they're trying to do, and sometimes it can be very far one way or the other, depending on the piece of legislation, um, you'll do fine if you're quiet and you sort of just do your work and don't do anything and don't stir the pot. Well, I'm a huge pot stirrer. That's how I've made my way in life. And that doesn't mean in a bad way, but I've never been afraid to step into the mix and give my opinions and also be corrected on my opinions. I've been wrong lots and lots and lots of times, and I love being proven wrong. I love seeing another person's perspective. Um, but that's not welcomed in that space. What's welcomed is follow the leader. What's welcomed is you're a party person, and so therefore you follow the party rule. It didn't matter what your constituents felt or wanted, unless it fell within the ideology of the direction of the party. Um, you were accountable in a way that is very difficult to put into words based on multiple things. And if you were important in a tokenized version, and it's not just the conservatives, this is all of the parties, okay? Let me just be clear, this is everybody, not just ours. Then you were useful, right? And if you're useful, then you move up, you know all of those things. And I was moving up in a really interesting way, but not because I don't know if I was useful or if I was the right mix of vocalness to bring forward that idea. Once my usefulness was over, you get tossed to the side, right? And I was really lucky to be part of cabinet. So in Canada, in the provinces, our premier is like your governor, and our premier has a cabinet. And so I was part of cabinet. So that's the actually governing role, right? Within the province. So in the cabinet, I was given a really, really gorgeous role. It was just an amazing opportunity, and it was very juicy, and had a lot of lenses on the other major portfolios like health and child welfare services and education and all of that. And I loved it. I loved the work, but I did not enjoy the politics, to be truthful. I'm not that person. I can't like lie about things. And, fiscal policy for me is important. So if you're preaching that you're going to be good with the taxpayer dollars, which is not my money, then I would think that my responsibility to be good with taxpayer dollars, right? Like and that's not the way it is at all in any government. I don't care who they are, that's preached, and I really hope one day we get that right in some government or another. But in all honesty, every government comes in, has their pet projects that they want to do, and they're going to leverage your dollars towards what those are. And sometimes they benefit you, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes all ideology comes in, and none of that happens. We've had social services cut here. To my youngest son is autistic, so to adult age, which is people with advanced disabilities. We've had, which is again goes very much against the ideology of protecting your vulnerable, which is what governments are supposed to do. So, anyways, that's a big question, and I could probably talk without breathing. So, hopefully, that answers a bit of your question.
Yes, yes, it really does. And um, let's talk about that for a minute. You said you have a child that's autistic.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I know because of my background in behavioral optometry, I've been to many, in our country, it's called IEP meetings. They're meetings with teachers and administrators and the parents. And the parents are there trying to get help for their child, services. And then, the administrators and the teachers are there. And one of the biggest problems we've had here that's been my experience is that the parents are saying the child needs this, sometimes even professionals like me, because I've been to those meetings with the parents, and the administrators and the teachers are doing everything they can to not give them what they need. So I don't know if that happens everywhere, but it happens here in the United States.
Yeah, I think your particular focus is such interest to me because as you know with autism, eye contact is a really difficult thing for them because if they focus on eye contact, then everything else goes out the door. And you have to learn how to allow a child with autism to kind of look off, almost like they're being pensive and that their eyes are off in a different direction so that they can focus on something else. Because if their only focus is to look at you in your eyes so you're comfortable, they lose their ability to be able to focus on other things. So we learned that. Yeah, my son is 27 now, and he's just an amazing young man. He's broken every barrier. I get very defensive, especially when I hear things around how autism is curable or this horrible thing or whatever. Yes, lot as parents, all of us have stories. Everybody has stories about their kids, okay? Talk to anybody who has teenagers. It's like a whole thing, right? But we don't, we have moments. That's why, us girls, we get together and we vent and we talk about it and we figure out how to parent differently or to help out or have the community involvement and help nurture our children. Our kids are all raised by a village, or at least they used to be. And Saren was definitely raised by a village. And what we did is that we introduced him in all of his forms purely to the world. Screaming Saren, calm Saren, Lego Saren, builder Saren, singing Saren, whatever was his moment. And we took the time to explain to people if he was having a meltdown in the middle of Costco, which happens, we allowed the meltdown to happen. We didn't try to, shush him with stuff, like if you can, like if there's a way to, to soothe, obviously you're going to do that. If you can remove them from the store, then you try to do that, obviously, because it's not easy on anybody when that situation is going on. But we ended up educating a lot of people about Saren's who he was and that his quirkiness was a part of his personality and not to be afraid of that. And that kids cry, it's normal. Like just get over yourself and let it go. It's like when a child cries on an airplane, like I'm sorry. And it taught me a whole other level, I think personally, of empathy and understanding. And like that stuff doesn't bother me at all. Like nothing. Poop doesn't bother me, spit doesn't bother me, crying kid, bring it on. Like, and how can I help? You know? And we ended up making more friends out of that than I would say foes. And people who did not understand how to deal with Saren were not meant to be in our lives. Or not maybe at that time. Maybe they figured it out later. Maybe they had a loved one that was also going through it and they had to go through their own process. It's not a judgment call. It was more of a survival instinct at the time for our son. And so Saren was raised believing that he could do anything else that anybody else could do. And we made certain changes for him in terms of his ability to strategically understand the world. But we knew the world wasn't going to change for him. So we had to educate, we had to make sure people understood who he was. And the more we did that, the more they loved him. And so I started a musical theater program in my community for all of the children. But my strategically for me, it was to have Saren on stage because he loved music and he loved dancing and all of this. And he's really good. And so we started, and this program got so out of control, Dr. Leonard, like I couldn't even, I couldn't control how many students. And we had quite a few kids that had neurodiversities in that group. So you would have had such a great time. It's one of those things like somebody with your expertise. I can't even imagine what you would glean from a situation like that, watching these kids all have to function together and seeing like their reactions and how their eyes are reacting to all of it. But Saren really grew from that. And so now in his years that he is now, he drives. He has three jobs. He has a girlfriend. He
Mhm.
is looking to settle down and have a family. He lives with us right now and with his brother. But his brother and him are like best friends. They're 20 months apart. So they'll always take care of each other. We have one business that they run together with my husband. So we're really like that. And then we also have all of our grandparents either living with us or close by. So we're a multi-generational family. So they get that wisdom of the elders, and they also have to deal with being in a sandwich generation of taking care of both sides, right? Which is really good for them. We try not to get them burnt out because they get tired. Obviously, there's a lot of work there, but they've learned that country ethic, that be there for everybody. That if a combine breaks down in one field, the competing farmer from across the street drives their combine across and helps take off the field because that's what matters is feeding people, right? It goes beyond your own personal issues. And I think I think
Mhm.
politics was easy compared to raising a child with autism in a world that doesn't understand them. The politics bring it on. It's just nothing compared to the joy and the struggle that comes with raising a child at all, and one that has disability. I use lightly because we all have one at some point or another, but one that is different and quirky. Um, it really you have a very different lens on the world if you're willing to see it that way and lose the victimization of it and try and find yourself in this world of okay, advocacy and how do you help and how do you push and how do you help governments understand that these are very valuable human beings and worthy of all of the other things that other people have. There's work available, there's groups available, it's so much that we can do. Dating, life, potentially children one day, God knows, anything's possible.
Yeah, I had actually I interviewed a young man that is autistic, and I asked him, how do you want people to interact? How should they interact with people who have autism? And he said, with kindness, of course. And I thought that there was no better answer.
Yeah. And it's just, why have we lost that, Dr. Leonard? Like, kindness should be always our first offering, shouldn't it?
Mhm.
If it's not accepted and you have to, like, I have no right to say this because I'm a really feisty girl. Like, I'll fight for myself, if I need to. But that's like way down the line. Like, before that has happened, I personally will attempt with every ability to understand uh, you know, um, listen, even if I mean, politics taught me that even if I viscerally disagree with somebody, it's not my position to try and change somebody's mind. My job is to listen, to try and understand and help them feel better that somebody's got their back and understands. Even if it's not something I agree with, that's irrelevant, right? Their pain point is important. And if I don't understand that pain point, I don't know how to serve them as a public servant properly.
Exactly. So just changing again the subject here.
Yes.
So when we first came on, you said you were doing something with a delegation from West Africa. What are you working on right now?
Oh, so you were mentioning in my bio, there's an organization called ATRACON. So I'm one of their senior advisors and chiefs of country outreach. So I work in a couple different organizations that are looking at bilateral trade between Canada and other countries. Sometimes it's USA. Right now we're looking at India and Africa in particular because they're really on an upswing with dollars that they're investing into their countries and also expanding into other people's countries. And Canada is one of those countries, I don't know if you know this, but we only have 41 million people here in our entire country. It's a teeny tiny population in the second largest landmass in the world. We have the third largest resources in the ground for oil and gas in the world globally. We are very, very, very get her done kind of people. We're used to working in cold weather, hot weather. You won't hear people complaining about that. We put on our parka or our air conditioning and away we go, right? Like it's just we're very, very solid people. And so these organizations have really, really come out of the idea of how to build bridges of diplomacy between these countries because politicians are really, I think, they're trying, but they're failing in building diplomatic relationships. And for all of us, whether that's the United States or Canada, and I must say, can't imagine a better neighbor than you, my sister. We're so grateful to share a border with you as Canadians. I just feel so blessed every single day that that's who's my neighbor. But that may or may not always be the case, and it's really up to you and I, the business people, the diplomats, to make sure that whatever the politicians' ideological perspectives are at that time isn't impacting businesses and isn't impacting the ability for us to have trade negotiations and to work globally across. And so that's what really drew me into this because I work with BioAro and BioSport that you had mentioned earlier. So that's tech and AI and really interesting pipelines on helping to collate DNA.
Mhm.
And through that work, I was doing a lot of international work, and I saw this gap in the need for connectivity and people and eyeball to eyeball conversations where you can learn to trust each other outside of politics and policies, right? And so having come from politics, it's nice to be on the private sector side of things and being talking about prosperity and what can we bring to that country, or what are you bringing to us, and how do we leverage the strength of that? Like India outsources 50 to 70% of its tech. Isn't that amazing?
Mhm.
And Canada right now is producing about 26% of the wearable tech globally. So for our little population, we're really punching above our weight. So you can imagine those two heads coming together and the opportunities. We need to build a pipeline east and west for our natural resources to get it to Asia and all of this. And so there's opportunities for that, and we're trying to get one into the United States as well too through the trans. Which one is that called? I think it's energy. No, it's the other. It's Trans Mountain. I'll figure it out. But there's one that we've been trying to get into the United States as well too because we're such good partners together, and we'll see where that goes. But those are the opportunities, and so that's why I really felt Africa and India are on the cusp of real amazing. I mean, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. I apologize, but the diaspora, all of the countries, um, they're putting a lot of money into education. They're looking really heavily into their poverty numbers. They're trying to isolate and understand where the issues are coming from and really build up that middle class. And that leads to some really, really great opportunities. So they're building their tech, they're building their hospitals, they're looking at the problems. Like, for example, in West Africa, in Côte d'Ivoire, which is the coast side, they are the largest exporter of cashews, right?
Mhm.
So and raw cashews are transformed into the nut or whatever it is. Everybody eats cashews nowadays, and I bet you most people don't know where they're coming from. Well, they employ hundreds of thousands of people. So if we can get more and expansive work with our agriculture sector along with them and opportunities within that, it's good for everybody. But I think sometimes having come from politics, like I'd mentioned earlier, we're a bit handcuffed. And because we don't on one side, you can't make it look like you're picking a group, like picking winners and losers. But at the same time, when you're approached with a really good idea, it's like, well, how do you make that happen without looking like you're getting some sort of kickback from it or whatever? So it's really hard. It's hard for any politician
Mhm.
to make that work. So it's going to be up to you and me and these bilateral trade agreements and people in the private sector to really close the gap on that stuff.
Yeah, that's and I love it when I see business people. So, the government can only do so much because of some of the things you just were talking about.
Yeah.
But business people can create such amazing bonds. I mean, on Thursdays, I have my connection calls, and I have met some amazing people. And we're connecting and we're talking about real things and real life. And then we're connecting each other with other people. And we just get stronger and stronger. And the business people can do a lot because they do have the knowledge, they do have money and influence. And so, we can do a lot to change the way the countries are run and what people, how they can live.
It's so true and without judgment, right? I mean, all of us are going to have our unconscious bias about certain things. It's understandable. We all come from a background, we all have history, all of that. I think the biggest gift we can give to ourselves is knowing that we have that and trying to see there's always going to be good people and bad people in every culture, every faith, everything. Every group of us is going to have, and even within ourselves, there's that balance, right? Of good choices and bad choices, right? And the idea that there's some sort of perfect understanding or perfection within our politicians or within, the leaders that we choose, it begs the question of what it is that we're looking for. We need to I, I love what you said about governments can only do so much. That's actually needs to be the mantra. It's not what can your government do for you, but what can you do for your country? What can you do for people, right? We're so privileged and blessed. And I mean, even all of us on both of our countries, yours and mine, we're going through this incredible unhoused situation and methamphetamines. And do you remember back in the day, like we all used to like jump up and down when the drug dealers were caught. Do you remember that? Like when you'd get like big keys of cocaine being caught and this drug person and blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden, we're not going after the bad guys anymore. And it's all about the aspects of personal decisions and choices. And I appreciate that. I get that. Like I come from those roots. I think people should obviously make their own decisions. But addiction, we have to start looking at it from such a personal perspective. It's like any disease. It's like anything. It's like your thumbprint. It's like your DNA. It's unique and individual, and there's no one way that is going to ever solve that problem. Homelessness and how being unhoused is another symptom of being, you know, you're always in survival mode, right? And how we need to be looking at it from the perspective of not pointing fingers at who's worse or who's better or why or da da da.
Mhm.
What is the actual fundamental issue that we're looking at here? Is it an issue of jobs? Is it an issue of anxiety? Is it an issue of like, and I don't even know that. When we were kids, not to say that we had it perfect, but anxiety, you dealt with it. Like we had families and well, for me, farming communities around it. If you had anxiety, you jump into the deep end of the pool. I'm not saying everybody should do that, right? Not everybody's built the same way, but we have done something to our resilience that disallows us the opportunity to look at ourselves and go, okay, how do I pull myself up by my bootstraps? Like how do I face this addiction straight in its face? How do I walk into that meeting? Who do I need around me? Where's my family? Like um, people ask me all the time, like about if I could change something, like what it would be, or not change, but what would be my goal in life, legacy wise for us as Western democratic nations, would be about family and community and how we build those. We're very insular in our homes now, and we're not really worried too much about what's happening to our neighbors or with our neighbors. We're not necessarily having barbecues with them or walking our dogs, or it's very insular. Myself, I'm like this. I go to work, I work like 18 hours a day. And so I phone people all during the day. I send texts to people like, how are you? And I check in because I know I'm not always physically
Mhm.
available. And my, I think the solutions to these problems will come from family and community and um, bringing people back in despite the difficulty of where they're at that moment. If they choose not to at that point, you can't fix everything, but there's just so many doors that are closed now than being open. Do you find that?
Yeah,
That's just
I,
my
I
observation.
do. I remember, so I grew up in Michigan, and then when I graduated, I came down to Georgia. And when I started having a family, I realized how alone I was because I my church community was very close knit and we were at church whenever the doors were open. So that was our family. And if
Love
we
it.
needed food, somebody brought it. If you needed a babysitter, somebody would go to your house. And I was so used to, first of all, not paying for anything because we all helped each other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I found myself a single mom pretty quickly after having actually, I was pregnant with my third child and trying to find childcare and any help I needed I had to pay for, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have like no support here. But then little by little I was in a small neighborhood, and when the neighbors on either side of me and across from me realized that, I had gone through a divorce and I was by myself, they started coming over, which is amazing. I mean, the neighbor came and cut my grass. The other people asked, "How are you?" So, we have to go get back to that small neighborhood,
Yes.
where we're checking in with people.
And building that community that goes beyond the playground or, like in rural communities, like we have a lot of rodeos out where I am, and you see like you just gather and it's like food and harvest and all these things. And they used to be these huge, huge events. And now the rodeos are really like they're fun and they're cool and I love them. And yes, there's still a very sort of grassrootsy feel about it, but it's been very commercialized, which is great for the rodeo people. This is not a disparaging comment towards that because I love all these folks so much.
Mhm.
Um, the thing that I've noticed though is that it just lasts for this little moment, right? One of the things that attracted me to you and having this conversation was building our tribe of women who are, creating as opposed to destructing and looking at how we build each other up and composing the world that we want to see happen in the future, for our great grandchildren, right? So if we can look at what that song is going to look like, what that orchestration will look like, and what our part is, and what our song is, and all of that, and try and put it together, I'll feel like I've done something like to help, right? And nobody needs to know about it. It doesn't have to have my name on it. It just needs to be something that I can tangibly look at and say, okay, we're building community, we're putting ourselves back together, we're understanding each other's cultural differences, our rights to faith, our rights to speech or, without being hurtful or hateful or inciting violence, right? All
Mhm.
of these kinds of things that we just don't, I don't think anybody in their right mind would ever hope for. But, with social media and everything like that, that's the biggest voice out there. And the common sense voices of people that are saying, okay, it's all right. People are just letting off steam. It just is what it is. Let's just breathe and let's be patient and let's, bring them into our hearts and our minds and hope that we can be there for them so they can talk this stuff out in a nuanced way so they can realize that, okay, you have a right to be angry, but like this level of anger isn't going to help you anywhere. It's not going to fix anything, right? Like, I don't know how I have two boys, right? What do you have boys and girls? Do you have a
A
mix?
boy and two girls.
Boy and two girls, right? So you know this, like with sons, my only legacy is leaving good men in the world, right? And my good men will take care of your wonderful daughters, right? Hopefully, or whatever partners they choose down the road. But there it's so hard for boys, for young men to navigate this world. It's always been hard for women. We've always had our,
Mhm.
we could go through a long list of issues, but we're not making it better for ourselves and by making it worse for them,
Mhm.
right? There has to be an equivalent amount of raise of women and also uplifting our brothers beside us, the men that are in our life, right? And we're losing that. There's just been this huge attack on everybody who is something, right? It doesn't matter what you are. And I think that fundamentally we've got to go back to our basics on humanity and how we treat each other.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot to be learned in, that's why I'm really interested in these bilateral trade agreements because it comes back to humanity and relationships. And you were talking about this person that you met from West Africa, right? I speak French fluently.
Mhm.
So that's why I've been on all of these trade missions because um, it's just such a wonderful opportunity to delve into this culture and figure out, okay, well, how can we work together? If we thought that about every relationship, I mean, gosh knows it'd be exhausting, but still, like, you would have a different interpretation than just your, oh, well, they look like this or they cook like that or whatever it is, or their house looks like this or their garden or, a thousand different things that we worry about like our first world problems, right? I don't know. The life is too short. And I would hope that our conversations and the people that we impact whether that's in politics or whether it's through like your work that you do with podcasts and elevating people or the opportunities to build our tribe and our friendships
Mhm.
would go a really, really long way to laying a better pathway for that next group because these kids, oh man, they're in for a heck of a time. Like I thought we had it hard, Dr. Leonard. I just can't even imagine. I don't know how old your kiddos are, but
Yeah, things are changing so quickly. That's the
yeah.
thing. Things are changing so quickly that it's not even what you know. It's like how fast can you adapt? How fast can you look at what is right now and make a decision and be
Right
ready to
now,
make a different decision even 6 months from now because things are going to be different 6 months from now.
so reactive, right? Yeah. I mean, again, if we, maybe one of the things that we can help this next generation understand that there was this, I can't remember which culture it is, but like looking into each other's eyes, like, really deeply and like actually spending time looking at a person when you're talking to them. Sorry, and I'm not even looking at the camera. It probably looks like I'm looking down, but I feel so strange looking at that when your face is in front of me there. But really, really listening to a person is an art form.
Mhm.
And when you're getting your news in 150 characters and it's really reactive and spontaneous, and you have like spontaneous combustion from this person or that person over this issue or that issue, and you're really left wondering, okay, what is the real thing? And what
Mhm.
I've said to my sons and to the other young people around me, and because I've made this mistake of reacting really quickly, especially as a politician, I've said, in a good marriage, we always say just sleep on it, right? Like,
Mhm.
or don't go to bed angry or whatever. I know they're cliche, it doesn't always work, but like, or in a good friendship even, right? And I always say this to my kids, I'm like, get it out with somewhere safe, like with us, like just spill the beans, right? But then go sleep on it and think about it and see where is the situation the next day? Is it still like a war-like situation? Are you ready to like plow in with your, you know, whatever it is, like held high? Or are you breathing a little differently today? Are you able to see it from a slightly different perspective? Is there new information,
Mhm.
right? That wasn't available to you when you had your first initial reaction, right?
Yeah, actually, I was speaking to someone today. His name is Haim, and he's from New York, and very wise gentleman, by the way. And he said, you hear people say, I'm having a bad day, or I had a bad day. And he said, they're basing that on 60 seconds to 90 seconds of something that went wrong that they didn't like. And then they name the day a bad day. He said, but if they just, he says, some people say breathe. He says, if you yawn and count to 10 3 times, you will forget what you were thinking about. And you don't have to label it a bad day anymore.
That's brilliant, actually. I'm totally going to do that. I think we're all guilty of that for sure. And that's such an excellent concept, hey? Like an entire day is gone because of that 60-second or 90-second moment. Wow. That's very profound, actually, very wise. I think that, there's massive opportunities for us to reflect, and we're not really given the space to do so. It's not a normal thing to do anymore. Like my husband, he always used to drive me crazy. Like he has to go through this whole process, right? And I'm like, no, 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 we need to blah, blah, blah. Let's figure it out right now, and I need to know, and we're going camping. I need these 5,000 things, blah, and like figure. And he always had to like go and do his thing and process, and I didn't appreciate what that was until later on in my life. And I learned that I needed to actually do that myself because, I don't know, I'm such a like pleaser girl. Like if somebody asks me to do something, I'm like, yep, done. Next, right?
Mhm.
Give me my list. Okay, check, 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 check. I have to have those check marks, right? Then they're like, okay, next, let's go, right? And it totally stresses people out, and you can be very intimidating to people when you behave in that manner.
Mhm.
And, and my husband would be like, girlfriend, you go, do your check marks, like I have to breathe for a second and think
Mhm.
about this and go through like he goes, you're a multitasker, which I don't know if that actually exists. He goes, I can't do that. I can
Mhm.
focus on a couple of things. So give me my three things,
Mhm.
focus on that, and I'll let you know. He used to drive me bonkers.
Right, because you want to make a decision right away, and he needs a minute.
I need instant gratification.
Yeah, yeah. I have that with my friend too. He'll say, "I want to do this, da 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 da," and I say, "Well, let me just think about it." And he's like, "Well," and then he starts to get upset because I didn't say yes right away, and I'm like, "You didn't even give me a chance to think a minute about it." I said, "There's other people involved here. I have to ask them, you know." So just different way of processing, where I'm looking at everybody involved in what's happening, and he's thinking,
Yeah.
she didn't say yes to me right away. Why didn't she say yes to me right away?
And did you ever get to the bottom of like where his anxiety was coming with that? Like where like I had to do a lot of deep diving into my disease to please, as it were. And then if it wasn't sort of reciprocated, I felt like I wasn't as important as I was making that person. Did he ever give you any insight as to why he needs your reactions so quickly or?
Um, Not really. It's just that he thinks the way he thinks is the right way all the time, that type personality. And so he can't imagine that I would say no because what he's thinking is perfect.
That's okay. There's a lot of truth in all of that. That's hysterical. Oh my goodness. But very fun to kind of like break down and analyze, and probably very dedicated person, I would think, hey?
Oh yeah, he just can't imagine that I would question what he said.
Dare you? I know I started when I was in politics, I started with this commentary, especially towards people that were not maybe open to having their ideas questioned. I would say, if I may, I just, like, or, do you mind if I ask you a question about this, right? I just, I have some questions, and, I'm sorry if I didn't understand or if I'm misunderstanding, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, but could you explain this to me? And do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And what I found eventually is that it became a little less intimidating, and people were more prone to looking at their ideas from a different perspective. I didn't win with everybody, man. It didn't work on certain people, but it's just because they're like laser focused on they don't really give a flying leap about what you think. They're doing their thing. Um, but the average person actually really cares about what you think. And if we
Right.
can look, right, if we can look at it from the perspective of their importance in the discussion and be super, super respectful of how it is that we do that. And it doesn't always work. I mean, there's some situations like if we're working on a deal with the United States versus like in India, there's a completely different way of like get to the point in the United States, whereas in India, it's very polite and there's tea involved and multiple meetings and conversations, right? Like you're part of the family. You gotta, and I'm like that. Like I need to get to know you first before we like have anything transactional happen, Whereas, when I was in Silicon Valley, it's like, well, what you got? Blah, 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 and give me your pitch right now, elevator pitch, 5 seconds in the elevator. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay, blah. Right? And I was like, after a few days of that, I came home to Canada and people were like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Oh no, you were overstimulated.
I was just like, and here's my thing, and blah, 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 blah.
Well, the thing is, you can't move people unless you get them to feel something. I mean, you can speak to the logical brain all you want, but if somebody just wants you to spit something out and you haven't gotten them to the point where they're feeling with you, you're not going to get any response from them, or probably not the response you want.
Well, that's what I thought too. I like you, like it's about connections and about building relationships with people long term, right?
Mhm.
Because you just never know when you're going to come into each other's lives with something or the other. I
Mhm.
just was like, I was like almost like hyperventilating when I was there. So it's like, and who, you know, like where do I start in my conversation, right? And I was like, how can I catch you? You know?
Uh-huh.
And coming from politics is like, oh, I can pivot. Let's go, like whatever it was. But I was so wound up. I was sitting with this lovely woman on the airplane home from this event. I think I scared the living daylights out of her because I don't think I stopped talking for 3 hours. And I was just like,
Oh
and this, blah, 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 and my whole life story and everything. Like I was just so wound up. God, thank God, like we're still friends. I've apologized to her like 1,000 times, like for my incessant, like, I think I was just completely like releasing all the stuff. But like I said, when I got back to Canada, I was meeting with my friends and other, clients, potential clients, and I already speak fast. So you can imagine like being on like steroids from Silicon Valley, with that level of, needing to jump into the moment. I was just like right in the moment. No introduction, just like bulldozer girl. It's amazing how like a couple of days can really transform your brain.
Mhm. That is for sure. That is
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, so very interesting. Yeah. So I was gonna ask you too. So when you're with your background and everything, what do you find like the most interesting thing about people's faces? Like, are you able to glean a lot of information based on your expertise and your background? I'm so curious because I work with people all the time.
Yeah, there's some different things. For example, here's a really simple example.
Okay,
So
a
I've
fun
been an
example.
eye doctor for so many years. So I had a therapy center, so I looked at the whole person.
Yes.
But I'm just going to go to your basic eye exam. Everybody
Mhm.
knows about that eye exam. They put you behind this instrument. They ask you which is better, one or two, one or two, one or two.
Yep.
When I'm doing that, I can tell by the tension or relaxation of the person's face behind there whether they're going to say one or two,
Shut the front door.
because you're just watching, you're paying attention, or by if their breathing changes, or if their body all of a sudden relaxes, I know it's a good one. If it tightens up, I know, no, that's not the right one. So it's really subtle, just watching the person's body and just watching, even like said, tenseness, breathing or
Yeah.
not breathing. There's other things you can look at depending on, if you want to know why people are thinking or how they're accessing, you can look at different eye movements depending on where they send their eyes when you ask them a question. You know if they're accessing their visual memory or their visual remembered. So you can tell if someone's lying sometimes. I'm not always good at that. I mean, that's a skill, but you know, you can tell how they are. So if someone always keeps going to the side, I know they're very auditory because their eyes go to the side all the time. Someone who's visual, they look up. Someone who's very feeling, and sometimes they can't even picture things, they always kind of go down into their body. They're looking down.
Really?
There's so many different things as far as reading people's body language to see, how they're doing, or if their communication is matching, what they're saying is matching what they're feeling.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. I just think that's beautiful quality to be able to have. If you're able to read the room a little bit, you're going to go into it with a very, very different perspective and quality, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, anyone can do this, but if you notice someone shift, all of a sudden they take a deep breath, or you say something and all of a sudden you see them tense up, just being very kind, you can say, "Oh, I see that you felt a shift. I saw you shift. What
Yeah,
happened there? What just
yeah.
happened there? Did I say something that bothered you? Did I say, did you remember something, or did it spark an idea?" And you can just be really curious about why that shift happened, because whenever shift is happening, that's when change is happening.
Amazing. Wow. That's fantastic because again, we're kind of losing that art form of giving people that time and space and getting to know them better, aren't we? It's just like I said, it's just so quick. Everything is just so fast and information is coming at us at 100 miles an hour, probably faster than that. So that's a beautiful way to be able to kind of um, get to know a person a little bit, to help them be comfortable in this space, right?
Yeah. And as wonderful as it is that we can be here on, Zoom, and we can connect with people all over the world, because I wouldn't be connecting with you at this point if we didn't have this.
I know if you didn't
It's
find me and I didn't find you, I know we're so lucky.
so wonderful. but
Yeah,
there is still something to be said for being in the same room with somebody because
agreed.
you can feel them, you can feel their energy, you can see how they're breathing, you can match their breathing and get in tune with someone. And it's a little harder going across the screen.
It is, but we're getting pretty good at it, aren't we? Like it's getting a lot better. I remember I was in government during COVID, and so it just shut everything down. It was a traumatic time for everybody. But I remember after when we were starting to come back out into the world, and my favorite moment at that time was sitting in a theater with a bucket of popcorn and being able to smell everybody's popcorn and seeing it was like this like I started crying actually in my first theater that I was in there thinking how privileged I was to sit beside people and share their space and to have, I mean, at that time, I don't know if you remember, but they were serving popcorn in individual, like pre-packaged containers because you
Mhm.
couldn't lean over it and scoop it or whatever. But it was just still so awesome to get like hot, fresh butter on popcorn and sit beside somebody you don't know or near
Mhm.
them, right? And watch a movie together. I don't think we realize how important that contact is and what that kind of stuff takes away from you.
Yeah, it really, really is important. And also, talking about cultures, um, I know like in the Indian culture, and I think this is also like in the Japanese culture, because my first husband was from Japan. You go to the beach and there's a huge beach and people from those two cultures, they all go in this one spot. They all go like almost on top of each other, and then the rest of the beach is empty. And then you come to an American beach, and everybody's looking for the empty spot to be to have their own space.
Yeah, that's so true. In India, they don't really sunbathe. Like, there's not a lot of beaches. It's more like families will go, and because it's such a massive population, there's no such like if everybody's on the beach, it's just packed, right? Like, there's nowhere to go. Because 1.4 billion people, every coastal town is just packed full of people. But you're right. Like I think in cultures where there's large populations, they tend to be comfortable sort of in the space of others, right? Like even I noticed it in Europe too. Like people don't like sit far apart from each other on the beach. They won't sit like right beside each other, but they'll definitely be in the same area. And I don't know if that's a safety issue. I'm not sure what that was, but I know I'm like you. I'm like, if there's a beach and there's one person there, I give them their privacy and space, and I'll totally go to the other side, you know? And you definitely don't want to like sit right behind them because you know that they're going to feel uncomfortable, right? It's just an unwritten rule, I guess, for us.
Well, I love talking to you and but it's time for us to get
I
towards the end
know.
here. So this is a part where to tell people like how do they connect with you? Um, do you have services now? I know you're doing a lot of speaking engagements. You have a TED Talk coming up
I
and
do
training.
on voting in democracy on October 25th in Calgary, Alberta. Yeah, I'm very excited about. I'm very passionate, as you can tell, about our political systems and our right to vote. And if you look at women's rights to votes and how in the recent future that was, it's not something I'm willing to give up on. And I just try to help people understand that privilege a little bit more because it certainly is one for me. So if we can empower people to get to the boxes and vote for their people, good, bad, or otherwise, participating in democracy is such a privilege. So, and to get a hold of me, the best way is on LinkedIn. And we can post that link together when we put this out there. And if you're interested in bilateral trade agreements between United States and Alberta or Canada, we're working with the trade commissioners. We're working with lots of things, but especially with India and Africa, those are really my ties right now. And we would love to chat with you about any investments that you're interested in doing, how we can help you connect to the right people who are doing that. That's what we do. We facilitate and help out with that. If you're interested in looking at your microbiome, dental, skin, vaginal microbiomes, at BioAro, we produce FDA approved kits that are doing some really amazing work looking at your body and how it is that we can make you better and live longer. It's not just living longer, but better and happier and healthier longer lives. And we do DNA sequencing as well too in our labs. So we're doing some really, really interesting stuff. And our data security is really of utmost importance to us and data sovereignty. So we've been really doing a lot of work into that. I'm hoping to be able to work with some of your chiefs of staff of healthcare across your country. I've reached out to a lot of them to talk to them about some opportunities that we're doing between in the healthcare space. So I'm really excited to connect with them and hopefully see some bilateral agreements happen between our two great nations as well.
Beautiful. Well, now we have a personal question.
Yes, ma'am.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Can it be a couple of things or does it need to? Okay, because my family first and foremost for sure. And I don't mean that to sound silly, but my kids and my husband and my dog are like, and my extended family are like my favorite people in the world. But I have to tell you, Dr. Leonard, conversations like this with rock star women like yourself, those are so motivational for me. I believe that we have a very important purpose right now. There's an intersection of time that we're in right now where our voices are really going to matter. We're 52% of the population is women. There's no need for us to sit in the background at all anymore. And if I can help any woman elevate collaboratively together to get their voices shown, and that's what you're doing. For me, this is just it's my body shifts for to use your language. Like there's a physical shift in my presence and my humanity when we're allowed to discuss these things and you give space for a person like me to have long-winded discussions about things that are important. It's not often a platform that we have, so I'm very grateful. It makes me very happy.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here on the podcast and being so open.
Oh my goodness, my pleasure. It's because you're open. It's easy to give when it's coming back at you. So, thank you so much. And I'm looking so forward to our continued friendship and chatting down the line and seeing what us girls can accomplish together.
Yeah, me too. So I have one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Be authentic. Be authentic.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon.